Right, I hope that you guys can see the screen. Right, okay. So let's start our discussion and let's pay our attention. What is the question that we are going to discuss today? So I have selected a very popular poem in your syllabus, especially when it comes to your first term examination. There will be a question from this poem because this is known to be one of the most popular poems in your syllabus. Actually, when we discuss English literature as a subject, this poem is known to be one of the best poems which clearly delineates us the theme of appearance versus reality. So this poem is known to be a universal poem. First and foremost, we will try to understand what is the question, and after that we will have a plan what to write, and then we will move on to the answer. Right, okay. So let's pay our attention to the question. I hope you guys can see the screen. How does Edwin Arlington Robinson use irony to present the theme of appearance versus reality in the poem Richard Cory? Discuss with close reference to the text. So I told you, when you refer to this poem, the theme of appearance versus reality can be identified as the most important theme, most valuable theme that we all have to pay our attention. Right? So in this poem, Edwin Arlington Robinson tries to highlight the fact that appearance versus reality. Sometimes we think by looking at the appearance, sometimes we judge people. Sometimes we tend to do that. But in reality, the situation is totally different. So they have asked about that particular theme. Directly, they have asked about that particular theme. So we have to construct our answer based on that particular theme. Can you understand? So your answer should be based on that particular theme. You should not write anything which is not relevant to this particular theme. So when you are writing essay type answers, that is why this class is all about, like, you have to pay your attention to the paper class, because one of the major things that you have to remember that you have to write according to the question. Right? There is no point of writing something irrelevant, right? So pay your attention. What is the most important part, right? When you read the essay type question, you can clearly highlight the most important phrase or clause. Then you can construct your answer based on that phrase or clause. That is what you should do, right? So here I have made a small plan, and based on that plan, we can comment on the question. Right, okay. Now, what is the plan that I have made? Obviously, you have to start with an introduction to the poem and the poet. That is a must. When you are writing an appreciation, there is no, there is no way of writing an appreciation without giving some kind of a background. Definitely, the person who is going to write an appreciation about a certain poem or a short story or a novel or a drama, you have to have some kind of background knowledge. Otherwise, how are you going to appreciate this? After reading the poem, after analyzing the poem, you have to have some background about that, right? That setting should be there in your mind. So definitely, when it comes to your introduction, you should come up with an introduction, like introduction to the poet and the poem, right? A small summary maybe, right? So in the first paragraph, you have to come up with that. That part is essential, that is compulsory, right? So then from the second paragraph onwards, you can comment on the question. So I am telling you again and again, right? Make sure to remember, pay your attention to the question, the most important phrase or clause, right? So here basically we can pay our attention to the word irony. You know what do you mean by irony, right? Irony, there are three types of irony in English literature. We have verbal irony, we have dramatic irony, and we have situational irony, right? So here we can find situational irony, right? Situational irony can be seen here, not the dramatic irony, not the verbal irony. You have the poem called War is Kind by Stephen Crane, which can be taken as an ideal example for verbal irony, right? War is kind. But we all know that war is not kind. Situational irony means, in simple words, what you expect will never happen. What do you mean by verbal irony? Verbal irony refers to what you said is not what you meant. That is what we call verbal irony. What do you mean by situational irony? Situational irony refers to What you expect will never happen. What you expect will never occur. What do you mean by dramatic irony? Dramatic irony, right, occurs in dramas where characters are not aware what is going to happen, but the audience is aware of that. Characters are not aware what is going to happen, but the audience is aware of that. Right? So these are the three categories that you have to remember, right? In irony, right? Situational irony, verbal irony, and dramatic irony. So here we can find situational irony. People who live on the pavement, they believe about Richard Cory. They always think that Richard Cory is known to be the ideal character. He is known to be an ideal character. One day we also want to be like Richard Cory. They are actually envy of Richard Cory. But at the end of the day, we can understand this particular man having all the facilities, having all the luxuries, at the end of the day, he decides to suicide. Right? That is what we call unexpected situation. Right? What we expect will never happen. That is what we call situational irony. Appearance versus reality. So there are three keywords that you have to understand: irony, appearance versus reality. Appearance, reality, irony. So you have to remember these three keywords in order to write your appreciation. And finally, there should be a conclusion as well, right? When you are doing an appreciation, definitely there should be a conclusion as well. These are the key areas that you have to remember, right? Basically, you have to come up with an introduction. Then you have to write about how irony is used to represent the theme of appearance versus reality in the poem. You have to provide examples and explain. Provide examples refers to you have to provide quotations, and then you have to move on with your explanation. Make sure to remember the keywords and make sure to use those keywords in your explanation as well. This is what you do not do. Can you understand? You have to use those keywords in your explanation, in your paragraph, right? That is very important. And then finally we have conclusion. Okay, so let's start our discussion. First and foremost, we are going to start with the introduction. Edwin Arlington Robinson was born in Hettiarachchi, Maine on December 22, 1869. Although he was one of the most prolific American poets of the earlier 20th century, and his collected poems 1921 won the first Pulitzer Prize ever, right? So he is known to be a very popular writer. He has won the Pulitzer Prize as well for English literature. So that is my explanation to Edwin Arlington Robinson, right? So you don't have to include the date of birth and date of death and everything if you can't remember. But at least you have to remember his background, right? So what kind of awards that he has won, what kind of other poems that he has written, right? So that type of knowledge you have to have as a literature student. That knowledge is very important for you. In Richard Cory, Edwin Arlington Robinson explores the contrast between outward appearance and internal reality through powerful situational irony. Now you can understand how the teacher has used keywords. These are the things that you have to highlight. Keywords. When you are writing an appreciation as an ordinary level student, make sure to remember you have to use keywords which are taken from the question. Then only the marking examiner will get to know that, okay, this particular girl or boy is writing according to the question. Most of the students, what they do, they write the summary of the poem. That is not going to work, right? You cannot give the summary. The summary can be given in the introduction, right? And after that, you have to directly address the question. Don't write a summary. So I have highlighted situational irony and most importantly, appearance versus reality, outward appearance. Every single person who live on the pavement, they highlight outward appearance of Richard Cory. Outward appearance. No one is ready to see the inner conflict faces by Richard Cory. Everybody explains about outward appearance. I have highlighted that one as well. But no one is bothered to look at the internal conflict. No one is bothered to look at the internal conflict. This is what you have to pay your attention. Internal conflict. The poem highlights how societal admiration can be tragically misplaced, emphasizing that appearances often mask deep personal suffering, right? This is what we do. We like to judge people. That is what I have highlighted here. Read very carefully. Societal admiration can be tragically misplaced, right? So what do you mean by that in simple words? In simple words, the society is highlighted by the people who live on the pavement. They are the ones who are actually explaining us about Richard Cory's character, right? The third party. They can be identified as the society. But make sure to remember, sometimes our judgments are wrong. That is the message. So every single judgment made by the people who live on the pavement, at the end of the day, the poet proves the fact that they are wrong. They are wrong, right? This is what you have to pay your attention, right? Societal admiration can be tragically misplaced, emphasizing that appearance often masks deep personal suffering. This is what we call appearance versus reality, right? Sometimes we don't bother to see the reality because we always pay our attention towards appearance, not to the reality, right? We always pay our attention to the appearance, not to the reality. So here you can understand how I have highlighted the idea represented in the question. So you have to write according to the question. You can't write whatever the points that you like to write. Whatever the explanation that you are going to give, it should be according to the question. So in the first paragraph, after giving some introduction, I have given an entire idea about the poem. An entire idea, right? Overall idea, you may say. Overall idea about the poem, right? The poem highlights how societal admiration can be tragically misplaced, emphasizing that appearances often mask deep personal suffering, right? So at the end of the day, we only bother to see the outside appearance, but we never bother to find out what kind of troubles and tribunals faced by this particular person, right? That is my introduction, right? Okay, so I hope that you guys have completed. Pass me a message. Shall we move on to the next part? Parami, did you write Puta? Shall we move on? Are you still writing? Right, okay. Okay, Puta, take your time. Always remember, right, when it comes to this particular poem, definitely that theme will be highlighted. Appearance versus reality, because this particular poem is written based on that theme. That is one of the major weaknesses that we all have, right? We try to judge people by looking at their outer appearance. In English, we have a very popular explanation, very popular statement to this. You may have heard about that. Don't judge a book by its cover. You can use that in the explanation as well. You can use that in the explanation as well. Don't judge a book by its cover, right? That idea you can highlight here as well, right? Okay, how many of you are still writing? Shall we move on? Right, okay. So I hope that you guys have completed, right? So make sure to remember the key idea that we are going to highlight, right? What is that? Appearance versus reality and situational irony. Now I have explained you what do you mean by situational irony. What we expect will never happen. That is what we call situational irony, right? So people on the pavement, they believe Richard Cory is known to be an ideal character. He does not have any problems. He is stress-free. He is known to be an ideal character. One day we also want to be like him. We have that tendency by looking at the Facebook celebrities. You can also come to that conclusion, right? Okay, Ronaldo is known to be the most famous person in the world, so he doesn't have any problems. We don't know. He can't judge like that, right? Since because he has a lot of money, it does not mean that he doesn't have any problems. You can't come to conclusions like that. Every single person who live in this world, they have their own problems. Those problems will be different from your problems. Can you understand? So since because you don't have that problem, or else since because you have that problem, you cannot judge the other character saying that he doesn't have any problems, right? So the same idea is highlighted in the poem Clown's Wife by Johnson Nagard. That is another poem that you have. Clown's Wife by Johnson Nagard, very important poem. Right, okay, let's move on to the next part. The people on the pavement admire Richard Cory, describing him with almost a regal admiration. He is a gentleman from soul to crown. These are the examples that I am giving, right? I hope you guys can see the screen. These are the examples that I have given, right? A gentleman from soul to crown, which elevates him to an almost kingly status. He is known to be a king. He is known to be a king. Can you remember the other poem? I told you that. What is that poem? Clown's Wife by Johnson Nagat. Can you remember the quotation? On stage, on stage, he is a king on a throne. On stage, he is a king on a throne. But at home, you can hear him moan. Remember the quotations, huh? Right, okay. So, which elevates him to an almost kingly status. The phrase soul to crown not only emphasizes his immaculate appearance, but also his perceived moral and social superiority. His presence commands attention, and he was always quietly arrayed, and he was always human when he talked. So, from these quotations, you can understand how people on the pavement actually judged him, right? Important quotation. This suggests that despite his wealth and grace, he remained humble and approachable, a quality that further fuels the envy of the people who live on the pavement. Now this part I have to tell my dear students. Now, some people, they have money, they don't have humanity. Some people, they have humanity, but they don't have money. It is very rare that we see people who have got both. Now, Richard Cory can be taken as that kind of a character. Can you understand? He has knowledge, right? He's an honest character, right? Down to earth character, very humble character, full of humanity. He has wealth, he has good health. Richard Cory can be taken as the complete package. Richard Cory can be identified as a person with the complete package. This is what you can figure out, right? This suggests that despite his wealth and grace, he remained humble and approachable. That is why people on the pavement really liked him. That is why he became the most popular character among people. Richard Cory is known to be a very humble person, right? Irrespective of his money, irrespective of his social status, and irrespective of his stature, everything, he is known to be a very humble person, right? So sometimes when we get a lot of money, when we are wealthy, right, we don't take care of other people. We don't pay attention to other people. We think we are superior and other people are inferior to us. That is the mentality that we have. But Richard Cory is not that type of a character. Richard Cory is known to be a different character. This is what I have highlighted here. So I have given some important quotations as well. Make sure to write them down. Hurry up and write down. Pass me a message. Then we can move on to the next part. Hurry up. Right. So you can understand how people who live on the pavement try to decide Richard Cory's character. This is what we call judgmental, right? So you judge people based on the outer appearance, right? So they believed Richard Cory is known to be the ideal character, right? But at the end of the day, we realize the fact that he is not that kind of an ideal character, because even though he possessed so many qualities in his life, right? He could not face the reality, right? He could not face the reality. That is why he decides to commit suicide, right? So there can be problems like that. How can we judge people? What kind of right we have to judge people? We don't have any right like that. We can't actually judge people. That is the reality highlighted here. Hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. So providing quotations also play an important role, my dear students. Some people say that we don't have to provide quotations. No, when you are writing an appreciation, basically providing quotation plays a key role. Sometimes you can write quotations separately, or you can write quotations within the paragraph as well, but make sure to highlight them, providing quotation marks. Right, okay, I hope that you guys have completed. We are moving to the next part. Robinson uses this adoration to build up the stark contrast with the shocking final line. The narrator says, "In fine, we thought that he was everything to make us wish that we were in his place." This is actually, this statement is given by people who live on the pavement. People who live on the pavement, they strongly believe the fact that, okay, Richard Cory is known to be our ideal character. He has money, he has wealth, he has a very good health, he's a very down-to-earth person. Based on these outer appearance, they believe the fact that Richard Cory is known to be the ideal character. So from this quotation, you can understand that that is how the character is built by Edwin Arlington Robinson. Right? Richard Cory became an ideal character. Right? Who is your role model? If you go and ask the question from the people who live on the pavement, who is your role model? Richard Cory. Why? He has got wealth, right? He has got good health, very fine character, a good human being, very honest, very humble, right? Smart character, handsome character. You name it, he has it. You name it, he has it. Complete package. So that is the talent of the poet as well. Try to understand that Edwin Arlington Robinson is known to be a very talented poet, right? In order to give a shocking experience, first and foremost, you have to build up a character. In your poem, you have to build up a character that no one can destroy. That character is already built. Now, no one is going to attack Richard Cory. Why? Because Richard Cory is known to be an ideal character. Right? Richard Cory decides to commit suicide. No one is going to kill him. He is loved by people. So his character is created to that level. Can you understand? His character is created to that level. Then only the poet can give a shocking outcome. Really? Having everything, the bugger decided to die? Oh my gosh. When you read the last line, only people will think that, why? Why? That is what you have to think. Why? Having everything? Yes. Why? So this is the place where the poet gives an opportunity to the readers in order to think about themselves. Right? Really? All these materialistic things? We should never judge a book by its cover. The line is especially crucial as it encapsulates the collective longing of the people who live on the pavement, who struggle through hard labor and poverty while idealizing Cory's life. Can you remember how they idealize Cory's life? At the same time, there is a contrast. If you can remember, in the poem they say, right, we cursed for food, we cursed for meat, right? When Richard Cory is enjoying all the luxuries in his life, we people who live on the pavement, we still didn't get even a luxurious food item. We don't have even fulfilled our basic needs like food and beverages. When Richard Cory is enjoying his life to the fullest, we people who live on the pavement, we don't have even simple needs and wants in our lives. We have not fulfilled our simple needs and wants. So contrast, people who live on the pavement, Richard Cory, in two different levels. Contrast. That technique is known to be contrast. Right, okay. So hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. Shall we move on to the next part? Make sure to write your notes then and there, Puta. Then it is very easy for you to go through, right? Make sure to complete your notes then and there. Then it is easy, right? Right. So now you can understand contrast, how contrast is used, and this is the beauty of poetry, right? That is why this particular poem is known to be one of the most influential poems when it comes to the subject of English literature. This is known to be an ideal poem, right? It doesn't matter whether you are doing O level, A level, or you are in the university level. This is known to be an ideal poem which clearly discusses about the reality of life. This is a mistake done by most of the people in our day-to-day lives, right? Even we do this mistake, right? We judge people based on their outer appearance, but later only we realize that our judgments are wrong. So we should not be quick in order to judge people. That is the moral message given here. Each and every poem in your syllabus, they have a moral message. Yes, you can enjoy poetry, right? Poetry will actually give you the entertainment, enjoyment, and then you will be taken to the wisdom, right? Both should be there. Enjoyment should be there, and then after enjoyment, some kind of wisdom also should be achieved. Otherwise, there is no point of learning it, right? Both should be there. Okay, is there anyone who is still writing? Shall we move on? Right, I hope that you guys have completed. Parami, send me a message, Dual. Did you finish? Very good, right, okay. We will move on. Right. However, the poem ends with devastating irony. Now, this is the irony, situational irony. So, you have to ask, having all these facilities, having all these opportunities, having all these good qualities, why Richard Cory decides to commit suicide? Why? This is what you call situational irony, right? We will never take such a perilous decision. We will never take, but Richard Cory has taken. What is the reason behind that? That is the beauty of the story. And Richard Cory, one calm summer night, went home and put a bullet through his head. The abruptness and finality of this line catch the reader off guard. It shatters the illusion that wealth, manners, and appearance guarantee happiness. That is the illusion. That is the illusion that we all have, right? In this money making world, in this utilitarian world, there is the illusion that we all have. The illusion that wealth, manners, and appearance guarantee happiness, right? That is the illusion that we all have. The irony lies in the envy of people who live on the pavement. A man who, unbeknownst to them, battles inner demons severe enough to lead to suicide. So these inner demons are not identified by the people who live on the pavement. That is the tragedy. Sometimes we also don't understand that. Sometimes by looking at a celebrity, we may think that, okay, he or she does not have any problems in his or her life. He or she may be having an ideal life. Yes, comparative to your life, that particular person may be having a luxurious life, but it doesn't mean that he or she does not have any problems. You can't judge like that. It doesn't mean your idea is true, right? Sometimes that particular person may be having some kind of ideal lifestyle. There is no doubt about that. But the problem is you cannot come to an argument saying that he may be having an ideal life and he may not have any problems in his life. No, it doesn't matter how much you earn, people have problems. Problems does not depend on what kind of income that you have. That is a wrong idealization. You should not come to that kind of idealizations in your life. Right? Since because you have a lot of money, it doesn't mean that you don't have any problems. What if you have a cancer? Right? Even though you have tons and tons of money, can you enjoy your life? That is the problem. Right? When you have money, you can actually get good treatments and you are affordable to have a good life. But it doesn't mean that money and material success will actually give you some kind of happiness which is eternal, right? So you cannot come to conclusions like that. That is the basic idea highlighted here using irony, situational irony. I have highlighted that. And don't forget our question, appearance versus reality and situational irony, right? These three are the most important aspects that you have to pay your attention in this particular question. Hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. Okay, Parani has completed. What about the others? Did you write? Shall we move on to the next part? Okay, I hope that you guys have completed. So we will move on to the next part. Right. Robinson's use of situational irony is crucial to conveying the theme of appearance versus reality. While Cory seemed to glitter when he walked, his internal despair was invisible to the public eye. Everybody witnesses his glittering when he walks here and there, especially people who live on the pavement, but they never bother to realize what kind of inner conflicts, what kind of inner demons are there in this particular character. That is what we call situational irony. People who live on the pavement, they believe the fact that he is known to be an ideal character. He will live forever. He doesn't have any problems. That is their expectation. But what is the expectation of Richard Cory? Richard Cory decides, I am not going to live. Enough. I have a severe problem. I cannot explain that to the outside world. There is no point of explaining the problem to the outside world. The best option that I have is to suicide. Appearance, reality. Expectation, reality. Situational irony. Right? Okay. His internal despair was invisible to the public eye. Invisible to the public eye. The poem serves as a poignant reminder that wealth and status do not equate to emotional fulfillment, and it critiques the tendency to judge others' lives based on surface level perceptions. Right? Surface level perceptions. You should never judge a book by its cover, right? That is the behavioral pattern that we all have. We like to judge people, right? Right? We always try to judge people. That is the tendency that we have. But we should never do that. We should never ever do that, right? This is what actually criticized by the poet. This is what actually criticized by the poet. This is what you have to pay your attention as well, right? So people witness the glittering, right? When he walked, he is glittering. Situational irony. But no one notices his inner conflict, right? People expect him to be kind of a role model, kind to be an eternal character. But in reality, the situation is different, right? This is what you have to pay your attention. Hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. Right, is there anyone who is still writing? Please pass me a message. Right, okay. So we will move on to the next part. Now we are coming to the end of the poem. Thus, through carefully structured irony and contrast, this is what we call the conclusion, right? Now we have provided the explanation, we have given the introduction, now we are going to provide the conclusion, and from here we are going to finish our answer, right? Now you have nearly 25 to 27 minutes to complete one answer. At least you have to write 2.5 pages with 4 quotations, right? So make sure to write fast, right? Because you have to manage time as well, especially when it comes to your essay type questions. Thus, through carefully structured irony and contrast, Robinson exposes the tragic disconnect between how a person is seen and what they may truly be experiencing, making Richard Cory a timeless commentary on human assumptions and the hidden complexities of individual lives, right? So this poem is known to be a masterpiece actually, right? It can be taken as a masterpiece, right? So it clearly shows us, anyone who is doing literature or who is not doing literature, this poem can be taken as an ideal example. The poem can be taken as an ideal example for the theme of appearance versus reality. For the theme of appearance versus reality. This is what we can understand. So this is how you are going to write an essay type answer. So what are the key things that you have to remember? First and foremost, you have to read the poem very carefully. Right? Read the poem very carefully and make sure to understand the key ideas. Then only you can write an answer. When you go through the paper, first and foremost, read the question very carefully and highlight or underline what is the most important phrase or clause in that particular poem which will help you to build up your answer. When you read an essay type question, you have to underline that. Now here I have underlined irony, appearance versus reality. Those are the important phrases or important words that I highlighted. Based on that, I have constructed my answer using quotations as well. Each and every paragraph, I never forget to mention about the theme, appearance versus reality, and I highlighted situational irony as well. So you have to directly tell, directly explain, directly express situational irony, right? When you say irony, there are different types of irony in English literature, right? I told you dramatic irony, verbal irony, situational irony. Here we highlight situational irony. So you should exactly know what do you mean by situational irony. You should exactly know that, right? What do you mean by situational irony? These are the key concepts that you have to pay your attention. So hurry up and write down. Please pass me a message. Right, okay. With that thought, we will wind up the session for today. So next week, we are going to discuss some important questions related to your first term examination. All these questions and question areas are related to grade 11 first term examination. So make sure to participate to the class. Then you don't have to put an extra effort to study literature. You know what are the poems that you have and you know what kind of possible questions will be there when it comes to your term test paper and most probably for the O-level paper as well. Make sure to participate to the online class. The recording will be available in your community. Make sure to complete your notes and make sure to remember the quotations as well. So we will wind up the session. Next week we will meet to discuss another important poem and we will discuss what are the quotations that you have to remember and what kind of insight that you have to have when it comes to writing answers. Thank you so much. We will meet next week.